The Harris estate in Charleston, South Carolina, stood as a monument to wealth and influence. Its white columns and sprawling lawns, dotted with magnolia trees, drew admiring glances from passers-by. The house, with its iron gates and polished stone driveway, appeared in local magazines, always paired with phrases like "pillar of the community" or "legacy of grace." To the outside world, the Harrises were American aristocracy, untouchable and refined. But for Ava Wilson, the girl raised within those walls, the estate was nothing more than a polished prison. Ava came to the Harrises at 6 years old, a quiet child with wide eyes and a heart still raw from loss. Her mother, a gifted violinist who had raised her alone, died in a car accident, leaving no other family behind. Her father's name was a blank space on every document. The adoption, arranged through a local church's outreach program, was less about love than strategy. Robert Harris, a prominent judge, had sparked outrage with a racially charged remark during a high-profile case. His reputation teetered on the edge of ruin, and adopting a black girl from a tragic background became his carefully curated redemption. Ava was their absolution, a symbol to display, not a daughter to cherish. From the moment she arrived, Ava felt the weight of their expectations. The Harrises didn't beat her or lock her away. Their cruelty was quieter, woven into cold smiles and polite corrections. They gave her a room with a 4-poster bed and a closet full of dresses chosen for her, but they withheld the one thing she craved: belonging. She was told to call them Robert and Elizabeth, never Mom or Dad. When she once reached for Elizabeth's hand, hoping for warmth, Elizabeth gently pushed her away, saying, "We don't do that here." The rejection landed like a verdict, teaching Ava that love was not part of her bargain. The family's civility was a performance, flawless and suffocating. Robert, with his commanding presence and tailored suits, spoke of Ava with patronizing pride, our adopted daughter, as if she were a trophy to be polished for guests. Elizabeth, elegant and distant, corrected Ava's posture, her tone, her very existence, as if her presence were a flaw to be smoothed over. Their children, James and Sophia, absorbed their parents' attitudes. James, a rising lawyer, treated Ava like an obligation, his words clipped and mechanical. Sophia, a social media darling with a knack for cutting remarks, called Ava the family's charity case, in whispers that were never as quiet as she thought. They all shared one belief: Ava should be grateful for the roof, the clothes, the education, the surname. Grateful enough to stay silent, compliant, invisible. Ava's earliest memory of the estate wasn't its grandeur, but its silence. Not the kind that comforted or protected, but the kind that judged. It wrapped around her like a chain, heavy and unyielding, whispering that she didn't belong. She learned to move through the house like a shadow, her footsteps soft, her voice softer. Yet even as a child, she sensed the contradiction in their charity. The Harrises had opened their home to her, but not their hearts. They gave her a place to sleep, but never a seat at the table. Her adoption was a transaction, a public gesture to cleanse their name, not a promise of family. That realization settled into her bones early on. She stopped asking why she wasn't enough. Instead, she watched, listened, and learned. The Harrises thought they were shaping her into something small and obedient. But Ava was already building something else inside, a quiet strength, a spark that refused to dim. She didn't know where it would lead her, but she knew it was hers. And in a house where every word and glance told her she was less, that spark was the only thing that felt like home. Ava Wilson learned to navigate the Harris household like a ghost, her presence barely a ripple in the polished rhythm of their lives. The family's expectations were a silent contract. She was to be seen, not heard, grateful, not demanding. They enrolled her in Charleston's finest schools, where ivy-covered walls and manicured courtyards promised opportunity, but when she tried to join the drama club, hoping to find her voice on stage, Elizabeth's response was swift and cold. "Your tone doesn't suit the roles we value here." Her grades, always impeccable, earned private nods from Robert, but never a word of praise at the family's lavish dinners. Instead, she was tasked with clearing plates, while James and Sophia basked in their parents' approval. In family photos, Ava was positioned at the edge, her dress chosen to blend into the background, her smile a practiced mask to hide the ache of being erased. The Harris's cruelty wasn't loud, it was in the small, deliberate cuts. Her hair, thick and coiled, was chemically straightened every month, the salon visits framed as a gift but feeling like a correction. Sophia once laughed, comparing Ava's skin to rich mocha, her tone dripping with condescension as guests chuckled. At holiday galas, Ava stood 2 steps behind her siblings, her role reduced to a prop in their narrative of generosity. James, with his lawyer's precision, reminded her to stay in her lane when she offered an opinion. The message was clear. She was a guest in their world, tolerated only as long as she remained small. Yet the Harrises weren't the only ones who drew those lines. Charleston's elite, with their whispered judgments and sidelong glances, made sure Ava felt the weight of her difference. At a neighborhood garden party, a woman in pearls asked Elizabeth if Ava was the help's daughter, her voice loud enough for Ava to hear. The laughter that followed burned deeper than any insult. Beyond the estate, the city itself reinforced her isolation. Walking home from school, Ava once noticed a police car trailing her. When it stopped, the officer questioned why she was in this part of town, his hand resting on his holster. She explained she lived at the Harris estate, but his eyes narrowed, as if her presence there was a puzzle he didn't trust. The encounter left her shaking, not from fear, but from the realization that even the streets of Charleston saw her as an outsider. Another time, she applied to join a local youth council, excited to contribute to her community. The rejection letter was polite but final, citing cultural fit as the reason. Ava understood the unspoken truth. Her skin, her story, didn't belong in their vision of leadership. In the quiet of her room, Ava found solace in a worn box of her mother's belongings, salvaged from the church's donation pile. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with her mother's elegant script. "Ava, my light," one entry read, "you were born to shine no matter who tries to dim you." Those words became her anchor, a reminder that she carried a legacy stronger than the Harris's disdain. She read the journal in secret, tracing her mother's dreams of a world where Ava could be free. One night, clutching the journal, she made a vow. She would live for her mother's vision, not the Harris's rules. That vow led her to a community center on the edge of town, a place the Harrises would never visit. There she enrolled in a violin class, her fingers trembling as they touched the strings her mother once played. The music was her rebellion, a language no one could silence. She practiced in stolen moments, hiding the violin under her bed, afraid Sophie would mock it as too ethnic. Each note she played felt like a conversation with her mother, a bridge to a love that no one could take away. The center's teacher, an older woman with kind eyes, told her, "You play like you're carrying someone's heart." Ava smiled, tears brimming, knowing exactly whose heart it was. Through those years, Ava's strength grew, not in defiance, but in resolve. She stopped expecting the Harrises to change. She stopped hoping for their love. Instead, she collected the pieces of herself they tried to erase, her mother's words, her music, her dreams, and held them close. The world outside might see her as less, but in the quiet of her soul, she was building something they could never touch. She didn't know how or when, but she knew she would rise. And when she did, it wouldn't be for their approval, but for the girl who refused to let her light go out. Ava Wilson carried her mother's words like a shield, her quiet rebellion growing stronger with every step she took beyond the Harris estate's shadow. She enrolled in college through scholarships and late-night shifts at a campus library, determined to carve a path that was hers alone. While her peers dreamed of summer vacations, Ava balanced textbooks and the Harris family's neglected finances, untangling their chaotic ledgers in the dim light of her dorm room. She never told them, and they never asked. To Robert and Elizabeth, her work was invisible, just like her. But Ava didn't need their validation. She was building something bigger, a life that answered to her mother's dream, not their demands. Her ambition found a home in a nonprofit she founded, a platform that offered microgrants to Black entrepreneurs overlooked by traditional investors. It started small, a website cobbled together on a borrowed laptop, but it grew steadily, its impact rippling through communities the Harrises would never visit. Ava poured her heart into it, driven by the memory of her mother's journal, "Shine for those who can." She worked in the margins, her successes quiet but undeniable, her name absent from the gala invitations where Sophia's superficial accolades were celebrated. The Harrises didn't notice, and Ava preferred it that way. Their ignorance gave her freedom to become someone they couldn't control. It was at a tech conference in Atlanta that Ava met Lucas Bennett. She was there to pitch her nonprofit, her nerves fraying under the weight of skeptical investors. Lucas, a soft-spoken engineer with sharp eyes, stood alone by the coffee station, his own startup, a renewable energy project, dismissed by the same crowd. They struck up a conversation, two outsiders trading stories of being underestimated. His warmth disarmed her, his questions cutting through the noise of forced networking. "Why do you do this?" he asked, gesturing to her booth. Ava hesitated, then said, "Because I know what it's like to be told you don't belong." Lucas nodded, as if he'd lived those words himself. That night they talked until the venue lights dimmed, their connection sparking something neither expected. Their bond grew through emails that stretched into the early hours, each one a window into their dreams and scars. Lucas shared his childhood in a cramped apartment, his mother working double shifts to keep the lights on. Ava told him about the violin she played in secret, the notes that carried her mother's love. When they met again, this time for a weekend in a quiet diner, Lucas gave her a silver necklace with a tiny music for the part of you they can't touch, he said. Ava's fingers trembled as she clasped it around her neck, the weight of his belief in her heavier than the metal. She wore it under her shirt, a secret talisman against the Harrises' cold indifference. Their love wasn't loud or rushed. It was steady, built on shared silences and mutual respect. But when Ava's nonprofit hit a wall, a major grant rejected because her organization lacked prestige, she nearly broke. She sat in her apartment, staring at the rejection email, her mother's journal open beside her. Lucas arrived without a word, sat on the floor and pulled out his laptop. They rewrote the proposal together, his hand brushing hers as they typed. "You're not alone in this," he said. Those words, simple and true, pulled her back from the edge. By dawn, the proposal was finished, and Ava felt something new, hope, not just for her work, but for a life where she wasn't fighting alone. They married in a small chapel, witnessed only by close friends who understood the weight of their choice. Ava wore a simple dress, the music note necklace gleaming against her collarbone. Lucas wore a plain suit, his smile brighter than any vow. They didn't invite the Harrises, knowing Robert would scoff and Sophia would sneer. The ceremony was brief, but every word they spoke was a promise to build something honest, something theirs. As they stood together, hands entwined, Ava felt her mother's presence in the quiet, a blessing that no one could take away. She was no longer the girl who dimmed her light. With Lucas beside her, she was ready to shine. The Harris estate hummed with anticipation as the family prepared for their annual gala, a glittering showcase of their so-called legacy of giving. Ava Wilson, now a silent force behind the event, had spent weeks securing sponsors, coordinating vendors, and ensuring every detail was flawless. Her name appeared nowhere in the program, her contributions buried beneath the Harris name. She didn't expect recognition. She'd long stopped hoping for it. But the weight of her invisibility pressed harder as the gala approached. The family handed her a beige server's uniform, its stiff fabric a reminder of her place. She slipped it on without protest, the music note necklace from Lucas hidden beneath her collar, a quiet anchor against the storm she sensed brewing. As guests arrived, their luxury cars lining the driveway, Ava moved through the crowd with practiced grace, refilling wine glasses and dodging careless elbows. The attendees, Charleston's elite, laughed and mingled, their voices dripping with privilege. One woman, her diamonds glinting, mistook Ava for a caterer and snapped her fingers for more champagne. Another man, his suit tailored to perfection, leaned close and murmured, "Didn't expect the help to be so striking." Ava's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes down, her silence a shield honed over years. Then she overheard a guest ask Robert, "Is she your charity project?" The table erupted in laughter, and Robert's smile didn't waver. "Something like that," he said, his tone smooth as glass. The words cut deeper than Ava expected, a fresh wound in a heart already scarred. The gala's centerpiece was a stage near the garden, where Robert and Elizabeth delivered rehearsed speeches about compassion and community. James stood beside them, his lawyer's poise unshakable, while Sophia, in a cream-colored gown, posed for photographers, her smile as curated as her social media feed. Ava worked the edges of the crowd, her presence unnoticed by the family she'd saved. Behind the scenes, she'd cleared their overdue taxes, paid off a second mortgage, and funneled her own savings to keep the estate from foreclosure. She'd done it not for love, but for a flicker of hope that one day they might see her as more than a symbol. That hope, she realized now, had been a mistake. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden haze over the gathering, Robert raised his glass for a special announcement. His voice, slurred slightly from wine, carried a performative warmth. "Tonight we honor our history," he said, gesturing toward a decorative wooden column in the garden, meant to evoke Charleston's past. "And who better to reflect on it than our Ava?" The crowd turned, their eyes pinning her in place. Before she could speak, two event assistants, young and oblivious, took her arms and led her to the column. "It's just a symbol," one whispered, as if that softened the act. They tied her wrists with a silk rope, the fabric soft but biting against her skin. Ava stood straight, her bare feet cold against the stone, her server's uniform hanging limp. The crowd murmured, some chuckling, others raising phones to capture the moment. Sophia giggled, whispering to a friend, "She's used to playing the part." James rolled his eyes, muttering about unnecessary drama. The humiliation burned, but Ava didn't flinch. She fixed her gaze on the horizon, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "You were born to shine." She thought of the violin she'd played in secret, the journal she'd clutched through sleepless nights. This wasn't her shame, it was theirs. The rope held her body, but not her spirit. She felt the necklace against her chest, Lucas's gift, and it steadied her. The crowd's laughter faded into a distant hum, their faces blurring. She was no longer the girl who begged for their approval. She was her mother's daughter, and she would not break. Then a low rumble cut through the air. Heads turned as a sleek black car glided to a stop near the garden. The driver opened the rear door, and Lucas Bennett stepped out, his navy suit sharp against the fading light. His presence was a quiet storm, commanding silence without a word. His eyes scanned the crowd, then locked on Ava, tied, barefoot, unbreakable. He walked forward, each step deliberate, parting the stunned guests like water. Reaching her, he knelt, pulled a small knife from his jacket, and sliced the rope. Her wrists fell free. He took her hand, his thumb brushing the red marks on her skin, and pressed a gentle kiss to her palm. The crowd gasped, the air thick with shock. Lucas stood, his voice calm but unyielding. "This woman is my wife." The words landed like thunder. Sophia's glass trembled in her hand. James took a step back. Robert's face drained of color. Lucas turned to the crowd. "Ava paid your debts. She saved this house with her savings, her sacrifices. And you repay her with this?" He held up a document, the deed to the estate, bearing Ava's name. "She owns this place, not you." The truth hung heavy, undeniable, as the gala's facade crumbled. Ava stood beside him, her heart pounding, not with shame, but with the clarity of a woman who had finally been seen. The air at the Harris Gala grew heavy, as if the truth Lucas Bennett had just unveiled had stolen the breath from the room. The crowd stood frozen, their glasses forgotten in their hands, their whispers silenced by the weight of the deed he held. Ava Wilson, still standing by the garden column where moments ago she'd been tied, felt her pulse steady. Lucas's hand rested lightly on her back, his presence a quiet strength. Robert Harris, his face ashen, clutched the deed, his eyes darting over the paper as if it might rewrite itself. Elizabeth stepped forward, her voice trembling with accusation. "You deceived us, Ava. You stole our home." Sophia's wineglass shook, her polished facade crumbling. James, usually so composed, shifted uneasily, his gaze fixed on the ground. Ava's voice, when she finally spoke, was low but clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I didn't steal anything. I saved you." She looked at Robert, the man who had never been her father. "When the bank called, when your debts piled up, I paid them. I sold my car, drained my savings, worked nights to keep this house standing. Not because I owed you, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd see me as family." Her words hung in the air, raw and unyielding. The crowd shifted, some looking away, their earlier laughter now a bitter memory. Ava turned to Elizabeth. "You taught me to sit straight, to speak softly, but never to stand tall. I kept trying to prove I was enough. I'm done with that now." Her gaze swept the guests, Charleston's elite, who had mocked her just minutes before. "It wasn't just them," she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. "This city, this community, you looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong. You questioned my place, my worth, because of my skin, my story. I walked your streets, carried your judgment, and still I built something. Something for people like me who you never gave a chance." A murmur rippled through the crowd, discomfort replacing their earlier amusement. Ava's eyes softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "I don't need your approval anymore. I never did." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert opened his mouth, but no words came. Elizabeth's hands twisted together, her diamonds catching the fading light. Ava thought of a letter she'd found years ago tucked in Robert's study, a draft to the church, promising to love her as his own. She'd clung to it as a child, hoping it was true, only to learn it was a lie meant to appease others. That memory, once a wound, now fueled her clarity. "I believed in you once," she told them. "I thought if I gave enough, you'd change. But you didn't. And I don't need you to." Lucas squeezed her hand, his eyes full of quiet pride. The crowd waited, expecting anger, retribution. But Ava had another vision, one born from her mother's journal, from the violin notes she'd played in secret, from the love she'd found with Lucas. "This house," she said, gesturing to the estate, "is yours to keep. I don't want it. It's a cage, a monument to your lies, and I'm done carrying its weight." She paused, her voice steady. "I'm leaving. Not just this place, but the pain you tied to me. I'm building my own legacy, one that doesn't need your walls or your approval. My mother taught me to shine, and I will. For her, for me, for everyone you overlooked." A gasp rippled through the guests. Robert's shoulders slumped, the deed slipping from his fingers. Elizabeth's eyes widened, as if the idea of Ava walking away was more shocking than losing the house itself. Sophia took a step forward, her lips parting, but no apology came. James remained silent, his face a mask of shame. Ava didn't wait for their response. She'd spent too long waiting for them to see her. She turned to Lucas, her voice soft but firm. "Let's go." They walked through the crowd, heads high, leaving the gala behind. The guests parted, their whispers trailing like echoes of a world Ava no longer belonged to. As they reached the car, Ava felt a weight lift, not from anger released, but from a choice made. She wasn't erasing her pain. She was releasing it. The estate, once her prison, would remain in the Harrises' hands, but it no longer held her. She was honoring her mother's dream, Lucas's love, and the girl who had refused to let her light go out. Ava Wilson stood on the edge of Charleston, her new life unfolding in a modest house she shared with Lucas Bennett. They chose a home far from the Harris estate, its porch lined with flower pots they tended together. Ava's nonprofit grew, its micro-grants empowering Black entrepreneurs across the South, each success a testament to her mother's words, "Shine for those who can't." She no longer played the violin in secret. Its notes filled their home, a melody of freedom and love. At community events, she shared her story, not as a victim, but as a woman who had walked away from a cage to build her own light. Her first public act was a speech at a local youth center, where she told a crowd of young dreamers, "You don't need permission to belong, you build it, every day with every choice." A boy in the front row, eyes wide, asked, "How do you keep going?" Ava smiled, touching the music note necklace Lucas had given her. "You carry the people who love you, and you never let their light fade." Their life was simple but full of laughter, shared dreams, and a love that didn't demand perfection. Lucas's renewable energy startup thrived, its solar panels lighting up community centers. Ava's nonprofit supported. They hosted dinners, their table crowded with friends who felt like family, their stories weaving a tapestry of resilience. Ava walked barefoot in the mornings, her fingers brushing the necklace, no longer hiding it. She brewed coffee without bracing for judgment, played her violin without fear of mockery. For the first time, she was home. Charleston's elite whispered about the gala, about Ava's departure, their voices tinged with unease. Some wrote letters to the city, calling her ungrateful, but Ava didn't read them. She remembered the police officer who'd stopped her, the youth council that had rejected her, the guests who'd laughed. Their voices no longer defined her. At a community meeting, she said, "I was told I didn't belong, but I've built my place, and you can too." Her words sparked a movement. Volunteers, artists, and dreamers joined her, proving her light could ignite others. One evening, a letter arrived, addressed to Ava Wilson. The misspelling stung, but the sender's name stopped her, Sophia Harris. Inside was an apology, halting and awkward, asking to meet. Ava held the paper, her mind flashing to Sophia's giggles at the gala, her whispered taunts. She felt no anger, only clarity. She set the letter aside, choosing not to respond. Her family wasn't the Harrises. It was Lucas, her community, the girl who'd clutched her mother's journal. She walked to the porch, where the stars shone bright, and smiled. She was free, not because they'd changed, but because she had. Ava's days began with small acts, watering plants, mentoring kids, playing her violin. She laughed easily, her voice no longer measured for approval. Lucas sang off-key in the kitchen, his warmth a constant. Her life wasn't loud, but it was hers. She thought of the girl at the gala, wrists bound, heart cracked open. If she could speak to her, she'd say, "You're not finished. Your light is still there, waiting to bloom." Ava's legacy wasn't a house or a name. It was the lives she lifted, the dreams she sparked, the light she carried forward, unbroken and bright.